Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin were two of the coolest guys in show business, but they were not just part of the famous Rat Pack. They were what made it go. They were beautiful, stylish, and had sounds that could melt hearts. Women fell in love with them everywhere they went. They lit up Vegas like no one else could, along with Sammy Davis Jr. The Rat Pack wasn't just a bunch of people. It had a vibe. Their chemistry was electric, their jokes were natural, and their acts will stay with you forever. Fans couldn't get enough. Frank and Dean were best friends outside of show business. He or she is always seen having fun, laughing, and drinking. It looked like that. It was a huge surprise when word got out that Dean Martin had cut Frank Sinatra out of his life all of a sudden. Don't make any more calls, hang out, or use Rat Pack magic after that. What could go so badly wrong between two stars and best? Friends that one would slam the door shut without going through it? People who know a lot about stars say it all came down to one time, from fighting gloves to the stage. He used to be a tough kid from Ohio with a dream and a punch before he became Dean Martin, the cool guy who talked good and drank whiskey. Dino Paul Crocetti was born in Steubenville, Ohio, on June 7, 1917. Guy Sotano was an Italian barber who worked hard, and Angela was an Italian-American woman with deep roots in her own country. Growing up, life wasn't very exciting. In a small shop, his father cut hair, and his mother ran the household with love and determination. A brother named William lived with Dino when he was young. Well, let's just say things got rough early on. Dino got into the ring when he was 15 and gave himself the name Kid Crochet. He was tough, brave, and poor, so he punched with his bare hands because he couldn't afford the tape that most fights used. Because of this, he got a crooked nose, which was later fixed, a lip scar, and a lot of bruises. He fought with heart, even though he joked that he had lost 11 of his 12 fights. But Dino's life had other ideas. Upon moving to New York, he shared a small room with Sonny King, who was also interested in becoming a star. They did something. Crazy because they had no money and a lot of guts. People paid to see them box bare knuckle in their room. There were no rings or gloves, just straight fights. Dean even beat Sonny in the first round of one match. Talk about working hard. Even after he took off his gloves, Dino didn't really start living a good life. He worked in a shady casino that was hidden behind a smoke shop, first as a stock boy, then as a stickman and croupier at roulette. But he never let go of one thing: his voice. As a nod to opera singer Nino Martini, he called himself Dino Martini. It was bands in his area that played the smooth sounds of Harry Mills and Perry Como that inspired him. When he joined the Ernie Mackay Orchestra, it was his big break. By the late 1930s, his rich voice was already making people fall in love with him. Thank you, but no, no, no. He began working with Cleveland band head Sammy Watkins in 1940. Watkins gave him some very important advice. Change your name. Dean Martin was born right then. In 1943, Dean was taking the stage in New York. He was also briefly forced into the Army during 1 and 2, but he was let go after 14 months because he had a hernia. But the stage kept calling. Love also found him somewhere along the way. In October 1941, Dean married Elizabeth Betty Ann McDonald, and the two of them made Cleveland Heights their home. Before they broke up in 1949, they had 4 children, together. The path from a boxer from a small town to one of America's most famous stars was not straight. But that was Dean Martin. It's tough, cute, and always surprising. Dean Martin's early fame. Dean Martin was making a living in New York City by the middle of the 1940s. The voice, the looks, and the charm were all there. Every night, he sang in smoky clubs in the hopes of getting a big break in Hollywood. He was seen by studios like Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer and Collier Pictures, but they never made him an offer. It looked like the spotlight was just out of reach. But then fate changed things in a funny way. Jerry Lewis, a young comedian with wild eyes, and Dean met at the Belmont Plaza Hotel in New York in August 1944. Dean was playing at the Glass Hat Club. The first thing they said to each other was short but strong. Jerry says Dean walked up and said, "Hey, I saw your act. You're a funny kid." Those were just a few simple words, but they led to the formation of one of the most famous double acts in show business history. It started out as a friendship. They were both performers on the same show, and they both had a dream and a strong desire to be successful. They did have something else, though. There is electric energy on stage. It was like having lightning in a bottle. The next one was on July 24, 1946, at the 500 Club in Atlantic City. It was their first game as a team, but things quickly went badly. People in the crowd weren't into it. Not a single laugh. Skinny D'Amato, the owner of the club, didn't sugarcoat what he said after the first set. "You're out tonight if it doesn't work out." Dean and Jerry got together backstage because everything was at stake. Not a script or a plan, just their gut. Dean would sing. Jerry was going to make a mess. Indeed, that's what they did. Jerry tripped and fell on stage while dressed as a clumsy busboy. He dropped plates and ran into Dean, making the show a hilarious mess. Dean stayed calm and kept crunching while Jerry caused chaos. The crowd went crazy and laughter filled the room. They knew what to do now. Martin and Lewis were a big deal after that night. Their show was unpredictable, crazy, and completely unique. They did not play for the crowd. They put on a show together. During Dean's song, Jerry would yell at him. Joey would run across the stage after Dean. People loved the crazy things that were going on. Soon, they were hosting the Copacabana, playing to sold-out crowds all along the East Coast, and changing what comedy was all about with their unique blend of music, slapstick, and pure charm. They first appeared on TV in 1948 on The Ed Sullivan Show, which was called the Toast of the Town at the time. They shared the stage with artists like Rogers and Hammerstein. They brought in young writers to keep things interesting. Norman Lear and Ed Simmons are two names you may know today. These soon-to-be famous people helped them improve their habits, which made them more appealing to even more people. They had their own radio show and a brand new deal with Paramount Pictures by 1949. Their big break came with the movie My Friend Irma. The $75,000 wasn't a lot of money. However, their agent made sure they had something better: power. They were in charge of everything at York Productions, including bars, radio, TV, and records. They co-produced one movie a year, and the money came in millions. But the act wasn't just about getting rich or famous. It was friendship. Jerry was even Dean's best man when he got married again in 1949. They were amazing on stage. It looked like they were brothers off stage. Cracks began to show as the years went by. Dean started to feel like the straight man to Jerry's loud, funny antics that stole the show. Creative disagreements turned into anger that was kept to a minimum. Tension was building behind the laughs. Then the curtain fell in a way that no one saw coming. 10 years after their big break, on July 25, 1956, they played together for the last time. The team that Martin and Lewis were on was over, but their effect will live on forever. They changed the jokes. They switched the TV. Their lives changed because of each other. Even after the laughs stopped, the story never went away. The well-known Rat Pack. There was no more light on Dean Martin after Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin were no longer on stage. Not even close. He was actually just getting started with his best times. Martin was in the groove by the late 1950s. His single work was great. His voice was as smooth as good whiskey, and he was more sure of himself than ever. Frank Sinatra, another celebrity, was waiting in the wings with a drink in his hand and ready to go. Dean and Frank met for the first time in the early 1940s, when Martin was still a new musician trying to make it big. But it wasn't until 1958 that things really went well between them. They were in Some Came Running Together with Shirley M. Lamb. More than the movie itself, it was the start of a friendship that would become the beating heart of a societal phenomenon. That spark turned into something bigger than the screen. Between Martin and Sinatra, the Rat Pack became one of the most famous groups of all time by the end of the 1950s. Let me tell you a juicy story. They never really said they were the Rat Pack. That name came from a different group run by Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Beale, where Sinatra used to be a regular. After too many wild nights, Beale was the first to call them a goddamn rat pack. Martin Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, and Joey Bishop, on the other hand, liked calling theirs the Summit, or the Clan. The Rat Pack name stuck, though, and history followed it. As a group, they weren't just actors. They were the coolest people ever. The Rat Pack was the talk of Hollywood at night, but they really became famous in Las Vegas. The city was buzzing with energy when the band played at the Sands Hotel. People outside, like Frank and Sammy, would be teased by mayors. It was easy to understand. Anything could happen in the building. It did happen. Their shows were crazy, exciting, and never knew what would happen next. Dean might be telling jokes one night. The next thing he did, Sinatra would jump in the middle of a song he was singing. Lawford or Bishop would keep the jokes coming while Sammy Davis Jr. did a tap dance. On stage, they wore tuxedos, drank martinis, and insulted each other like they were old friends at a bar, and they could talk to anyone, not even themselves. Frank's love life, Dean's drinking, and Sammy's race and religion were all things they laughed about. It was brave and often risky, but it was always said with charm. And there was a bigger reason behind all that cockiness. Dean and Frank fought for what was right in the world with their fame. They stood up during a time of racism and division. They wouldn't play in places that wouldn't let black or Jewish artists in. It wasn't just equality that they talked about. They did something about it, even if it meant losing big gigs. They were brave enough to break down doors that had been locked for too long. The Rat Pack's magic never really went away, even when the cameras stopped rolling. After many years, the new Ocean's 11 movie, starring George Clooney and Brad Pitt, was influenced by their swagger. There were still stories going on in Dean Martin's old Palm Springs home, where tuxedos were left hanging, old martini sets were hidden, and pictures of the group were frozen in time. Dean Martin and the Rat Pack were more than just stars. They worked as crew under the lights of Las Vegas and changed the rules of show business. They were a group of brothers, a group of rebels dressed in tuxedos. They really were the meaning of cool. Dean Martin's marriages were troubled. Dean Martin was more than just a charming guy. He also had a lot of heart and kept love and marriage close. In 1941, a young Dean married Elizabeth Ann MacDonald. This was the start of everything. Because they loved each other, they had 4 children. Craig in 1942, Claudia in 1944, Gail in 1945, and Dina in 1948. But as Martin's business took off, things at home started to go wrong. The marriage was over by 1949. Dean was given control of their 4 kids, which was a surprise at the time. He was suddenly single again. He didn't stay by himself for long, though. Martin married 22-year-old model and former Orange Bowl princess Jean Beager just 1 week after getting divorced. Yes, it was short, but it turned out to be the longest and most seen friendship in his life. Dean and Jean became one of Hollywood's golden couples because she looked so good and he made her look like a movie star. They had 3 kids together: Gina, Dean Paul, and Richie. Along with being Dean's wife, Jean raised his 4 kids from his first marriage as if they were her own. She was the matriarch of the Martin clan and the glue that held the big mixed family together. They had a great time for more than 20 years. There were red carpets, cameras, and tuxedos and dresses that matched. But cracks were appearing behind the shine. The story came to an end in 1969. Dean asked for a divorce, which made his fans very sad. For them, this breakup hurt almost as much as his breakup with Jerry Lewis at work. Martin later made a joke about it, saying, "It's supposed to be gentlemanly to let the woman file, but I'm no gentleman." Even bad things had a funny ending. Dean hadn't given up on love, though. In 1973, he married Catherine Hahn, a former receptionist who looked like a model, for one last chance at happily ever after. They didn't have any kids of their own, but they adopted a little girl named Sasha. She quickly became a part of Dean's life, but this chapter 2 didn't last long. The marriage ended in divorce after only a few years. Dean was done this time. He never married again. Even though there were breakups and sadness, one thing stayed the same. Dean Martin cared about his family. Director Tom Donahue once said that Dean cared a lot about his family. Dean was always trying to connect with people, whether he was on stage, in a movie, or at home. Love didn't always last, but he was always loyal to the people he called family. The sad story of Dean Martin's life, no matter how cocky, sly, or smooth he was, Dean Martin was really just a family man. He played an attractive bad guy on stage, always with a drink in hand and a joke ready. But when he wasn't performing, his 8 kids were everything to him. And Dean Paul Dino Martin, who was named after him, was the person who meant the most to him. There was more to Dino than just Dean's golden boy. He was born from his second marriage to Jean Beager. He had all the qualities that his father admired: ability, charm, and drive. His jobs were to sing, act, and play tennis professionally. At the very end, just when you thought that was enough, he joined the California Air National Guard as a fighter pilot. There was more to Dino than just following in his dad's path. He was making his own famous way. But that bright light went out on March 21st, 1986. It was just another training run for Dino over the California desert. But his jet was no longer seen on radar somewhere over the cloudy mountains. Then there was radio quiet. Fear set in. The clock began to run out, and the son of one of America's most beloved stars had vanished. Right away, the search began. Experts, helicopters, and nothing else. It's been days, and still nothing. Dean's has been friends with Ronald Reagan for a long time, and Reagan sent the country's most powerful spy plane to help. Martin was a mess at home in Beverly Hills, where he smoked a lot and prayed for a miracle. But he really thought the worst would happen. He wasn't the only one. His old Rat Pack friend and best friend, Frank Sinatra, knew this kind of pain all too well. 10 years before, his mother had died in the same mountain range in a plane crash. Sitting next to Martin, Sinatra whispered, "If there's anything I can do, pal, anything at all." But there was nothing that could be done. They had to wait for the phone to ring. Martin really wanted to know if Dino was dead or alive, so he went to psychics. One psychic felt Dino's flight suit and pulled away right away, saying that he was gone. Another person pointed straight to San Gorgonio Mountain, which is where Sinatra's mother had died. After 3 days, the search team got to the mountain and found what Dean was most afraid of. Broken things were spread out on the slope. Nobody made it out alive. Dino died when he was 35 years old. Martin was broken up by the news. He broke inside. It was clear to everyone who knew him. Dean Martin, the king of cool, was no longer in the building. He was no longer lively, charming, or wisecracking. The loss of his son had left him with only a shell of a man. As always, Sinatra thought he knew how to fix things. He asked Martin to be a part of a big stadium reunion tour like the Rat Pack used to do. He thought that Dean would get over his sadness with the help of the people, the attention, and the friends. That was a mistake. Dean didn't like any of it. Frank loved the late nights and loud stadiums, but Martin liked small club shows better. It was too late for him to party until dawn. He wished for peace. He instead got people he couldn't connect with, bright lights he couldn't stand, and an old friend he no longer talked to. Quickly, cracks started to show. Martin forgot the words to his songs and botched his jokes on stage. He also flicked a lit cigarette into the crowd one time. He had spent decades making himself look like a likable drunk guy, but now it just seemed sad. It was no longer fun to do. It looked like pain in a suit. The 3 people went back to their hotel after a particularly bad night in New York. Frank was ready to have fun. The younger Davis was willing to play, but Dean shut the door on them. That night, he got on his private jet quietly, flew back to Los Angeles, and didn't say a word. The tour went on with or without him. The crowds were shocked. The press was all over it, but Martin was out of it. There was no magic left. But even though he tried to stay out of the press, one thing kept him going. Family. It hurt to lose Dino. Dean did have 7 more kids, though. His family grew as the kids got older. He married Carl Wilson of the Beach Boys, plus Dorothy, Hamill, Olivia Hussey, and even Lucello's daughter Carol, who is an Olympic figure skater. Martin stayed close to the people who were most important to him as time went on. But the years were bad. On stage, the drinks might have been apple juice, but the smokes were always real. In September 1993, sick people at Cedars-Sinai told him bad news. Cancer of the lungs. They told him that surgery might make him live longer. Martin said no. He might have thought if he were still the man he used to be, but that man died with Dino. By the beginning of 1995, Dean was no longer involved with public life. The charming crooner who once ruled Las Vegas, the movies, and the lives of millions spent his last months in peace with his family and a few close friends. Dean Martin died in his Beverly Hills home on Christmas Day, 1995, from severe breathing problems. He was 78 years old. This strange event took place exactly 29 years to the day after his own mother died. The coolest person in the world died. There was no more crunching or charm. There was only the memory of a life that had amazed millions, but ended in solemn silence. Why Dean really cut Sinatra out of his life? Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra used to be best friends and couldn't be separated. They were the center of the Rat Pack, Hollywood royalty, and the charm and fun kings. Behind the glitz and glamour, though, their friendship turned into something darker and messier. And many people close to Dean say that he finally cut Sinatra out of his life. Not because of small fights or competition, but because he couldn't handle the chaos that came from behind those old blue eyes. It's possible that one wild night in Beverly Hills was the last blow. It all happened on Dean Martin's 49th birthday, June 7, 1966. Since he and Sinatra were both at the top of their games, they chose to celebrate with their normal style: fancy drinks, close friends, and late-night luxury. The setting was the famous Polo Lounge at the Beverly Hills Hotel, a dark and fancy place where stars, business people, and troublemakers hang out. Martin had lots of reasons to be happy. He was making the most money as an entertainer at the time thanks to his movie parts, music, TV shows, and Las Vegas shows. Even at age 50, Sinatra wasn't a slouch. He was still in charge of movies and shows, deeply in love with Mia Farrow, who was 20 years old and was worshipped everywhere he went. That night, Richard Kai, who is best known for his role as Don, Barzini in The Godfather, and Jill Rizzo, who was Sinatra's time shadow and henchman, joined them. There were also a few women who weren't named. Like most Rat Pack nights out, Jill Rizzo was bigger than life. He was big and had a glass eye. He used to own a club in New York. If Frank was the storm, Jilly was the thunder. He was known for his smart slang and love of Sinatra. As soon as the birthday party crew took over a big booth, everyone was talking about it. People laughed hysterically, drank a lot, and used strong, sometimes offensive language. Since they were in Beverly Hills, they seemed to own the place. But not everyone in the Polo Lounge liked him. A 54-year-old multimillionaire and former president of Hunt's Foods, Frederick R. Wiseman, was sitting at a booth close by. He was more than just wealthy. People in both the business and art worlds looked up to and admired him. Franklin H. Fox, a 74-year-old Boston businessman and family friend, joined him that night. After a quiet dinner where they talked about their kid's upcoming wedding, they stopped in for a drink. But they weren't ready for how loud and crazy the Rat Pack was. After putting up with the noise for 10 minutes, Weissman had enough. The laughing got louder and the language got rougher. He spoke to Sinatra's group and told them to calm down. Someone said something like, "You're too loud and there are women here." Sinatra wasn't ready for the task. That's what he thought, at first. After a while, he understood the man was for real. But the party went on anyway, even though Sinatra told them, "You're out of line." From here on out, The night gets dark and dangerous. The story goes in a million different directions depending on who you ask. Sinatra said that Wiseman punched him in the eye out of the blue, giving him a black eye. He then said that Wiseman tripped and hit a drink table. There was no push or punch back, it was just a fall. Others, like Franklin Fox, said Sinatra said something anti-Semitic, made fun of Wiseman's glasses, and walked off, only to come back moments later in a full-blown rage. Frank was asked to leave it alone by Martin and the others, who tried to stop him. But in a fit of anger, Sinatra is said to have taken one of the Polo Lounge's famous pink phones and thrown it straight at Wiseman's face, knocking him out. Another story says there was a lot of yelling, grabbing, and confusion, and Wiseman ended up on the floor, flat on his back, not moving. One thing stayed the same in all of them: the crash. There was a terrible thud as Frederick Wiseman hit the ground, breaking crystal, a tablecloth, and an ashtray. He did not wake up. Fox tried to get him to wake up. Security came in quickly. The Rat Pack crew quickly ran off into the night, getting Sinatra out of there before the cops showed up. There were paramedics who rolled Wiseman out on a bed. Dean Martin made his way into his house quietly when he got home. Deanna, his teenage daughter, was shocked to see him get home early on his birthday. When asked if anyone was hurt, he gave an unclear answer. Frank blew a fuse tonight. He can't let it go. I'm not sure. I don't know what happened, but it wasn't over yet. Wiseman got better that night and went home, but he didn't wake up the next morning, or the next. He was taken to Mount Sinai Hospital right away and told that his brain was broken. After hours of surgery, he was not awake. Doctors weren't sure if he would live or die. Chief of Police for Beverly Hills, Clinton Anderson, was scared when he heard the news. The public knew a lot about Sinatra. He was famous, but he was also a close friend of John F. Kennedy and had ties to both politics and organized crime. But a man was in a coma, and it was hard to tell what was going on. Anderson asked for a full probe. The stories that hotel, workers and guests told detectives didn't make sense. No one knew for sure what had taken place. Did someone hit or push Wiseman, or did he just fall? On top of that, Sinatra and Martin were no longer there. They had actually flown out of town. The police chief told the press that Sinatra was hiding. He said it wouldn't last long, though. As word of the event spread, gossip magazines had a great time. It was hard to say no to the idea of a Hollywood star calling a millionaire and braining him. Some people had already been hurt, even though no one had been charged yet. This included names, relationships, and maybe even Martin and Sinatra's friendship. Dean Martin saw the night as a sign of all the bad things about being Sinatra's friend. The attention, the drama, and the uncertainty that followed Frank everywhere he went. Offstage, Martin was known for being very quiet. He liked being with his family and having peace and quiet. Sinatra was not like that at all. It's all heat, emotion, and show. From that night on, they grew farther apart. Some say Martin stopped calling Sinatra back. Others say he chose to stay away because he realized being friends with Frank was too much stress. On Las Vegas stages and in Hollywood, the link that used to rule began to fall apart. Frederick Wiseman got better in the end, but it took a while. No charges were ever brought. It was put under the thick rug of Beverly Hills high society, just like so many other scandals during that time of great fame and power. In spite of that, Dean Martin never forgot that day. For a party, he had shown up. He broke up with a friend, caused a police probe, and left with a deep sense of unease that would never go away. There are times when the shine is only a cover for the cracks underneath. Do you believe Dean Martin had a good reason to stop seeing Frank Sinatra? Let us know what you think in the space below. Don't forget to share, like, and follow for more. Also, click on the video that comes up. Next, you'll have fun.